Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Tonight, we're diving into Moldova, the small nation caught between the allure of the European Union and the looming shadow of Moscow. On the 20th of October, Moldovans face a choice that could redefine their country's future. Moldova is holding a presidential election and a referendum to decide whether to enshrine its European aspirations into its constitution. And with no candidate likely to secure an outright majority, a second-round runoff on the 3rd of November seems inevitable. Moldova's future is hanging in the balance, and the stakes could not be higher. So let's dig in and take a look at our latest report.
Russia's plot to derail Moldova's path toward integration in the Euro-Atlantic community thickens. Moldovan authorities have compromised a web of over 100 people trained in Russia and the Balkans to stir post-election unrest in the southeastern European country and have arrested several suspects.
I urge all citizens to be vigilant. Lately, destabilization attempts by criminal groups controlled from outside have intensified. In 1 month alone, state institutions have documented payments worth 50 million euros to 130,000 people in a bid to influence their vote, to create chaos and prevent our country from entering the civilized world, where there is peace and people live in harmony and prosperity.
Hidden camera videos released by the Moldovan authorities purportedly showed post-election mock protests practiced in Russia, Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. One of the videos featured young people on a stage in a training hall chanting slogans such as "Our language is Russian," "No dual citizenship" and "We don't want to be in Europe." The Moldovan police chief held a presser on Thursday saying that the network was financed by Russia-friendly fugitive oligarch Ilan Shor, wanted in Moldova for his involvement in the theft of about $1 billion from the poor ex-Soviet republic's banking system around a decade ago. Shor's party was declared unconstitutional in Moldova in June 2023 and has been banned ever since.
The West is rotten, and we have to admit it. The Shor party, like Lenin, lived, is alive, and will live.
The development comes at the last for long before Moldova's presidential elections on October 20th. Incumbent President Maia Sandu, an ally of the West, is hoping for re-election in a vote happening alongside a referendum on whether Moldovans want their cash-strapped country of 2.5 million people to join the European Union. Being part of the bloc opens perspectives for an improvement in this regard.
We will invest 1.8 billion euros in your economy over the next 3 years, and we will focus these investments on sectors that will generate economic growth and public services.
Whether Moldova belongs to either the West or Moscow will be decided on Sunday, October 20th, at polling stations in the country and abroad, where nearly 230 polling stations are to be deployed in a total of 37 countries.
And now, as always, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. For starters, let me bring forward the presidential hopefuls. Leading the pack of 11 presidential candidates is the incumbent, Maia Sandu, polling at around 36%. She's like the Beyoncé of Moldovan politics, independent, visionary, and all about upgrading to a European lifestyle. Heck, even put a ring on EU accession by 2030. See, Sandu's not just running for re-election, she's pushing for a constitutional amendment to solidify Moldova's EU ambitions. An October opinion poll shows 63% support for this move. However, critics say her domestic record isn't quite as sweet. Some argue that her promised justice reforms have fallen short and that oligarchic networks still wield significant power. Enter Alexander Stoyanoglu, the former prosecutor general, polling at 10%. Backed by the Socialist Party and close to former President Igor Dodon, he is campaigning on judicial reform. Oh, and by the way, the man is under investigation for corruption. And he is promising to clean up corruption. Talk about electing a fox to guard the henhouse. Then there is Renata Usati, Natalia Morari and Ion Chiku, all polling between 0 and 7%. They are like the backup dancers, present but not stealing the spotlight. Usati is seen as too close to Moscow. Morari faces questions of alleged Russian financial backing, and Chiku is trying to shake off the ghosts of Moldova's political past. But let's talk about one of the most important electoral issues, which is socioeconomics. Moldova is one of Europe's poorest nations, grappling with high unemployment, low wages, and significant negative migration. According to the World Bank, poverty remains pervasive, especially in rural areas. Many Moldovans, particularly in rural regions, are skeptical about European integration. They worry it could exacerbate economic inequalities or undermine national sovereignty. Now, these concerns are especially strong among older citizens and minorities, like the Gagauz, who have historically leaned towards Russia. And speaking of Russia, the Kremlin is not sitting this one out. Oh no. Moscow is offering Gagauz pensioners and public sector workers $100 a month through payment cards issued by a bank linked to the Russian Defense Ministry. Considering the average pension is about $220, that's nearly a 50% bonus. Moldovan officials report that more than $15 million in Russian funds have been funneled to some 130,000 citizens through networks linked to fugitive oligarch Ilan Shor. They estimate that the Kremlin may be funneling up to $100 million to sway the campaign. It's financial interference on a scale that officials in Chisinau describe as unprecedented. So, while President Sandu pushes for a European future, Russia is pulling out all the stops to keep Moldova within its sphere of influence. Maya Sandu must convince the left-behind voters. But European integration isn't just for the urban elite, but will bring tangible benefits to all Moldovans. So, to the people of Moldova, the choice is yours, and this decision will have ramifications far beyond the country's borders. Because if the referendum fails, or if Russian interference sways the election, Moldova could find itself slipping back into Moscow's embrace. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Georgi Koberidze, head of Political Research Center, GIPA. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, do you think there is a substantial risk that the result of the elections in Moldova and the accompanying referendum might be skewed in a direction that the public would not have wanted, but certain countries outside Moldova would have really appreciated? And of course, we know which country specifically we're referring to.
Yeah, absolutely. Please keep in mind that Russia never accepts the idea of equal rights for its own former colonies and territories. And when I mention colonies, it's obvious because there's obvious reasons, because in Russian current political elite, still they refer Moldova as a Bessarabia, not the Moldova itself. The term Bessarabia is a historical term, of course, but Russia tries to refer as its former imperial territory within the Russia. Therefore, Russia never accepts the idea of free Moldova or Moldova within the European Union or Moldova even we join into the Romania. And we have to understand the context, right? Moldova tried everything. Moldova tried these past 35 years. Moldova tried to have find some kind of settlement with Russia. Moldova even have some sort of different kind of pro-Russian governments, for example, oligarchic governments, communist governments, who are willing to do some favors for Russia in order to give Russia, get from Russia some kind of help to settle the problems within the Moldova. And when I say problems, we have to understand that we are talking territorial conflicts in Gagauzia and Transnistria, and also there is some other obvious problems. For example, problems of immigration. Thousands of Moldovans left the country and went to the Romania or Italy. Also, there are some other problems with the economy, and Moldova and Russia never helped Moldova to settle that kind of issues, and vice versa. Russia wanted to control Moldova through that kind of destabilization in that region, and Russia even put forward the idea that Moldova and Ukraine can go conflict to each other, and Russia did that in the early 90s. So when we are talking about the Moldova, I want to emphasize that Moldova is not a country who like did great these 35 years. Totally opposite of that. Moldova had these great issues, and most of the great issues came from the Russia. So right now, Maya Sandu's government tries to diverge and change that political course and political faith even, and change the country's direction towards the European Union, because it is a demand for its young population. And when I'm saying young population, we also have to understand that there is some major generational gap between older and younger generation in Moldova. Some part of older generation still believe that Russia is some kind of spiritual guardian of orthodoxy, and therefore Europe is some kind of morally corrupt entity. Therefore, this gap between this generation is still tangible within the Moldova. But what Russia is doing is not something new. It's Russia's old playbook, because Russia tried it several months ago in Armenia, right? When Russia tried to get rid of Pashinyan's pro-Western government, but Russia then failed. Russia also did that and tried that in 2020 in Moldova and 2023 in Moldova, and also failed. But Russia successfully managed to achieve that kind of goal in several African countries. Therefore, as I mentioned, this is a very old chapter from Russia's playbook, and maybe we are witnessing the major shift in Moldova. Right now, Moldova's political institutions and state institutions are very weak, but a few months later, maybe everything totally changed in favor of Moldova.
So Russia can see that the overall sentiment is very much in favor of the European Union, and so it knows that it cannot change this sentiment organically. It doesn't have that much to offer. And following the aggression of Ukraine, I mean, it might have alienated many of its former supporters as well. So what Russia is doing is trying to cheat, as usual. There are reports of money changing hands, of a number of activities, a number of various projects which have been launched by Russia. And you have the involvement of Mr. Ilan Shor, whose party has been banned, but he's still active. He still apparently wants to bribe people into voting against the European Union. So what is the state of play right now? Is the Moldovan state, you've mentioned that state institutions are not at their strongest. Can they withstand these efforts from the Russian Federation and from its proxies to interfere with these elections and with the referendum? Do they have the legal apparatus, for example, to face this threat at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. First of all, I have to mention that young population who are supporting idea of European Union are very energetic, and they are very supportive, and they try to protect the idea of Moldova's European future. But also, we have to understand that Moldova is one of the poorest countries in European soil, and also Moldova ranked 86th when it comes to Human Development Index. And this is not something new, because what we are witnessing in Moldova is the brain drain. The huge amount of population, especially young population, especially intellectual population, left the country and remain the people. Well, not most of them, but some of them, especially people who are very poorest, are trying to find another way to survive, and that another way is, for example, Ilan Shor's money, for which is flooded of Moldova, and also Russian money, who can use Gagauzia as some kind of trading post. We can say that, to enter into the Moldovan politics and spread the money all around Moldova. And when I mentioned Gagauzia is a very interesting thing, because Gagauzia is a de facto and de jure part of Moldova, but they have their own government, they have their own perception of Moldova's foreign policy, and they are staunchly protectors of the Moldova's neutrality. Therefore, it is not all about the money, but it's also all about the conflicts, and it's all about the military and some kind of paramilitary forces which Gagauzia have. Therefore, Russia has some kind of different tools without even beyond the money. But here is
according to reports, they are willing to spend like $100 million on disinformation and various activities intended to undermine these elections, right?
Yeah, and it's very successful. We have to understand that Moldova's older generation still speak Russian, and some almost the 15% of Moldova's population knows not just fluently of Russian, but they even speak Russian in homes. Therefore, Russia's influence in Moldova is very strong. But as I mentioned, some huge amount of almost 25 of percent of Moldova's population have also Romanian citizenship. Therefore, they have some sort of stronger ties in Romania, and therefore they know what kind of the promises and offers can European Union offers Moldova. Therefore, it is kind of watershed moment right now in Moldova. And if Moldova's population support the Maia Sandu's government and referendum when it comes to changing political foreign policy, we can witness maybe major change in Moldova's politics, because older generation will find out that there is no comeback. They have to accept the changing idea, changing environment, changing circumstances, and there will be a strong European future in Moldova. And especially, this is also keep in mind that almost 2 billion euros from European Union will transfer into the Moldova to protect Moldova's not just a European future, but also to establish and strengthen Moldova's political and state institutions, which is, well, decisive.
One quick question. You've mentioned Russian speakers. What propaganda channels is Russia able to use in Moldova? Have, for example, Russian television channels been banned, or are they still legal? And if they are banned, of course, that still leaves a major channel of influence, which is a plethora of online channels, chat groups, and so forth. So how does Russia actually go about trying to influence the public, or at least the part of the public that's still receptive to its narratives?
Well, TV still maintains as one of the major tool for Russia to influence the Moldovan population. But most importantly, Russia uses Telegram and Russia influences Facebook to influence Moldova's population, who are great amount of Moldovans trying to use internet as a source of news, source of information. And most of social networks are controlled, not controlled, but they're flooded of different disinformation from Russia. And this is very popular in the Moldova's older generations. They are use also Russian tools, for example, Contacte, which is also a Russian tool to influence the population. But the major instrument of Russia's propaganda is Facebook. Most of them are using Facebook.
So overall, the amount of effort that Russia is putting into that is substantial, and they also still have the tools to influence the public. But at the same time, it is all the more impressive that despite the presence of, as you've mentioned, Russian social media and television channels, the bulk of Moldovan society still prefers to look to the future within the European Union, and hopefully the referendum is going to go according to the will of the people and not to the will of those at the Kremlin. Very much so. Georgi Koberidze was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. The United States has decided to rejuvenate its F-16 training program for Ukrainian pilots by focusing on younger trainees. But this has its drawbacks. Here is more.
The death of an F-16 pilot in a crash during a Russian assault in August prompted the re-evaluation of the US training program. Initially, the training targeted experienced Ukrainian pilots, but language barriers and challenges in adapting to Western-style instruction have convinced the Pentagon to shift toward younger recruits. New Ukrainian cadets should buckle up for a year of pilot training before honing their F-16 piloting skills in the US and Romania. This could prolong the F-16 training timeline by several months, further postponing Ukraine's ability to deploy a fully operational squadron.
Russia has been using a shadow fleet of tankers to bypass Western sanctions and keep the Kremlin's war coffers full. But the UK has decided to put a stop to this. Here is the full story.
The vessels used to bypass international sanctions by shipping Russian oil under unclear owners or without proper insurance, but not anymore. Under its latest sanctions, Britain on Thursday blocked 18 tankers of the Shadow Fleet from accessing UK ports and maritime services, bringing the total number of sanctioned vessels to 43. But as the Kyiv School of Economics has recently said, the volume of Russian oil being transported by shadow tankers had nearly doubled to 4.1 million barrels per day by June this year. The report also revealed that 70% of Russia's sea-based oil exports are facilitated by these ghost ships, despite Western sanctions.
Did you hear that thud? That was Russia's workforce hitting rock bottom. Let's take a look at this story in greater detail.
The Central Bank of Russia has reported that the country is facing an unprecedented workforce shortage, reaching its lowest level in the third quarter of 2024. The bank's survey, which covered 13,300 companies, revealed that worker availability has plummeted to a record low since the monitoring began. Manufacturing enterprises producing investment and consumer goods have suffered the most severe personnel shortages. Still, Russian businesses maintain plans to expand their workforce in the fourth quarter, though their hiring ambitions have become more cautious. Russian analysts warn that the number of businesses facing staffing challenges continued to rise. Any reversal of the trend remains dubious, particularly with the recent decisions to increase military personnel numbers and to reduce the country's temporary migrant worker quota by nearly half in 2025.
And to wrap up this edition of Eastern News Flash, let's take a sneak peek at China's plans to expand its strategic influence in the South Caucasus through recently signed agreements with Azerbaijan and Georgia.
One of the deals signed in September was a memorandum of understanding with Georgia. Focusing on trade and building on a broader strategic partnership announced last year, the document outlines plans for joint infrastructure development, improved customs processes, and enhanced security and digitalization in logistics. But it seems that Azerbaijan has a key focus on China's efforts in the region. Azerbaijan's state rail company announced that China would join a joint venture established last year to improve cargo transportation along the Middle Corridor. Alongside expanding trade and investment ties, Azerbaijan sought greater involvement in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and applied to join the BRICS group, both of which are heavily influenced by China. In July, Azerbaijan and China agreed to elevate their relationship to a strategic partnership, similar to the agreement China signed with Georgia last year.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Bye for now.